Happy Tuesday. I even know the day. Come on and say hi. Let me know if you are joining in live. If you're watching on the replay, you are equally and as ridiculously as welcome. We're joined today. Let's get my fingers the right way. That way.
Yeah, this
Sarie Taylor. How are you, Sarie?
I'm really good, thanks. Yeah, very good indeed. Raring to go.
Yeah, it's really nice. You're very lucky today because Sarie is incredible and is going to share some amazing stuff with you. But also, it means that you don't have to listen to everybody doing the trees out there. So that's always a goodie, isn't it? You don't have to listen to, it seems like 100 people cutting hedges. But Sarie is here with you today to talk about getting out of your own way, shifting and manoeuvring yourself out of your own way. She is a psychotherapist and coach who specialises in, would you say you specialise in anxiety? And
I tend to find that I've got myself a reputation for being an anxiety specialist, and probably partly because of my own background. And then, so I'd say yes, in a way, but I'm doing, I suppose, over time, it's interesting really, Emma, because when I was still really quite anxious and trying to fix my anxiety, lots of anxious people came to me, which is interesting. And then whereas now, because anxiety doesn't show up very often for me, I'm finding that I'm getting people showing up for me for other things now as well. So it's kind of going like this, but I will always support people with anxiety because I am so passionate about it, because I think as a society, we have this idea that it's something that needs to just be managed and put up with. And I absolutely do not agree with that. So I will always help anybody that's anxious because I know how awful it is and it's so unnecessary. So kind of yes and kind of no. Do a bit of everything.
Have a variety.
Yes. Yes. All right.
Yeah, so come on in and let us know that you're here, that you're around. Share out the video so that all the gorgeous people who need to watch in today can become of today's live call or watch the replay. We will come and do questions at the end so that I can hand over the reins to Sarie so she can have a chat with you. And then I will come in and put your questions to her at the end. She might pick up on some things that come through as she goes. But I'm going to hand over the stage to you, Mrs., and let you.
Great. I'm trying to, as you speak now, I'm just trying to go in and share your video onto my page as well. But hang on, let me see. Oh, there we are.
Oh, look, you can do it without even doing the old lady eyes. I do the
like this.
Yeah.
To be honest, Matt, I don't know what it is, but during lockdown, my eyesight has got terrible.
Special ages now.
It's probably partly because I've not been to be tested for a very, very long time. Right, here we go. Share to a page. Let's have a look. And share again, and then I'll concentrate on what I'm doing. Where are we? There we go. Yay! Done.
Awesome. Right, I am going to disappear off the screen. If you want that screen shared, then just give me a yell and I can pop it into the feed, and I'm here if you need me, but I will disappear for now. Sarie is all yours.
Enjoy. Thanks. Hi. I can see a couple of people there. Rebecca, hi. Tracy, refreshing to hear. Yeah, I think what I'll start off by doing is just giving a brief overview of my history, because I think it can help sometimes for people to see, I suppose, where I was at one stage, which is probably much more severe than most people have experienced anxiety, thankfully, and where I am at now. So I was in the corporate world, actually, like Emma beforehand. I worked in recruitment, was the last corporate job that I did, and I ran my own division of a recruitment company, which, as you can imagine, was completely relentless, target-driven, never-ending cycle of stress and overwhelm. And I'd been traveling the world with my now husband. I'd been to uni. A lot of my friends and people would say, actually, you know, I was one of the most laid-back people out of our friendship group. Seemed very cool, calm, and collected for the most part. And yet I ended up in my early 20s being so severely anxious that I went back to my mum's house. And within the space of about 2 weeks, I went through various stages where I then ended up not willing to leave the house. I was in total fight or flight, panic stricken for weeks. I have no idea how I'd got there, no idea how to get out of it, was completely petrified. Then got to the point where I wouldn't let my mum leave the house. So if she would want to go to the local shops, bless her, she would have me almost having a toddler tantrum of please don't leave me. Like at 20 odd years of age, her daughter had been traveling into uni and she's probably like, what on earth is going on here? So in the end, I mean, I was fortunate in that I had private healthcare. I say fortunate, to be honest. I think whatever four walls of a hospital you're in is never that pleasant, whether it's private or not. But I begged and pleaded for them to take me in somewhere. I wanted respite for a few days. I wanted my mum to have respite so that she could feel a bit free from sort of being a prisoner in her own home, really, with her daughter. And so I ended up spending a month in the Priory. And so I was diagnosed with anxiety and depression, I think. I'm not 100% sure exactly what I was diagnosed with. But I then spent a month really, I was heavily medicated, and they, would try and get me to do things like yoga, try and do a bit of exercise, all of that stuff. In my book, I've got no shame whatsoever. For any of you that know me or follow me will know I'm very, very much an open book. Don't shame too easily these days. And I talk about, how I went to yoga class and I'm like in this position. And this lovely old lady who's helping us all with this yoga class comes round and tries to move my legs to literally make the position better. She pushes my legs and I do an almighty loud fart. And that was my yoga days over. My yoga career ended before it began. And so I can laugh and joke about stuff like that now, but actually at the time, it was the thing that I'd always feared. When you get that kind of sense of losing control and feeling like, oh, I'm going to go crazy. Like that was always a fear for me. And my fear had come true. I'd gone crazy in my mind. I was crazy. I was in a mental institute, whether it be private or not. And therefore, like this was the worst case scenario. Now, when I left there a month later, as I say, I was heavily medicated. So I did feel much more chilled out. And I did feel calmer, but I was on beta blockers, Valium, antidepressants. So of course I was going to feel physically calmer, but I still really had no idea how I'd got to where I got, what I needed to do now and how I was going to go on and live my life. So I left there, and to be honest, I was still a little bit attached to stigma of how on earth have I ended up here? This is embarrassing that I've ended up here. I don't want people to know that this is what's wrong with me. And so I was even embarrassed to go on and find myself a therapist. I then realized that if you study as a psychotherapist across the 4-year course, you had to be in therapy weekly as part of your training. And so for me, that was instantly an in where I could go, right, tell everybody I'm training as a psychotherapist. It makes me laugh now because I think I must have been so scared at the time and so embarrassed, whereas now, I just wouldn't be. But so I thought, that's my inroad. I'm gonna train as a psychotherapist, and that way I'll get the help and support that I need, and I can just say that I'm a trainee psychotherapist rather than I am someone who has failed massively and I am broken and I need fixing. So there began my career. Then what I found was that every couple of years, every 18 months to 2 years, now by this time I'd had my daughter, I'd experienced postnatal depression with her, but again, it's just a label. My dad was dying at the time, all sorts of stuff was happening. But every 18 months to 2 years, if I was lucky, I'd get 2 years. I would then end up again with crippling anxiety where I would build my business up to a point, or I was kind of dipped in and out between working for myself and doing sort of projects and contracts for other people. But I would always get to the point, usually around this time of year, interestingly, that I would just fall apart and I would retreat to my bedroom and I would get highly anxious again. I would go back and get medication and I'd start that cycle of probably about 2 to 3 months of getting myself back on track. And so because of that, I continued to train in different areas. I did some hypno training. I did some DBT training, CBT, you name it. I've done it. And it was always really deep down to try and find that one golden nugget that would change my life forever and would stop me from being anxious, because I always felt that my anxiety, my mental health, or whatever, for other people it might be, I don't know, it could be anger, it could be drinking 2 glasses of wine every night, whatever it is, that our behavior that then feels like it stops us from getting on and being successful in our eyes and doing what we want to, getting what we want to achieve. And so I continued to explore, and then eventually I came across something called the 3 principles, which I'm going to touch upon today. It's something I could talk about for a week without taking breath, so it will just be a real overview. And if anything, it might just spark your interest in exploring and learning more about it for yourselves. There's loads of podcasts, there's loads of all sorts of stuff that you can listen to in order to understand more about it. And these 3 principles are effectively a description of how it is to be a human being, you know, how we work psychologically. And it's the most simplistic form of understanding that I've ever come across in my whole entire years of exploring everything there is to know about psychology, mindset, psychotherapy. And it was at that point that everything shifted for me massively, because what I realized in a nutshell is that I had been massively overcomplicating my mental health for so many years. And we talk a lot about, I saw a post actually, I haven't read it, apologies Emma, I haven't had a chance to read it yet, but I saw the title saying mindset is bullshit. And I love that. I don't know what it says in the article, but I would agree with that title, because we place so much emphasis on understanding ourselves and exploring ourselves and this, that, and the other. And we can hugely overcomplicate what is actually a really simplistic, wonderful system of human nature. And there was a lot of resistance from me in the beginning, in that it can't be this simple. I've trained all these years. Like, surely it's got to be more complicated than this. But the more I explored and the more simple it seemed, the more my life was just sort of transforming in front of my eyes. And yet nothing was massively different about my life on the outside. It's just that I was able to enjoy things and to find contentment in the smaller, the littler things. And again, in terms of my business and my work, I've probably never worked as little hours, but my business has never been as successful. And so this idea of working smarter, not harder, I am an absolute true believer in, but it's not necessarily all about just having systems in place, which help. That's why I have a wonderful VA called Christina Smith, who you might know. So that's all really helpful, but it's about actually simplifying our expectations on ourselves, the pressure we put on ourselves, our understanding of ourselves. That's what makes a huge difference. So for example, if I felt under the weather, a bit wobbly, in the past, I would have cancelled everything. I would have had to stop. I would have felt like I had to shut that away, because it would be the one thing that would tip me over the edge. I couldn't cope with it. Whereas now I know, because I know my own resilience and capability, I know that I can still show up having a wobble. I can still show up when I'm having an experience of feeling anxious. I can still show up and do all these things, because I am much more trusting of my own capabilities and resilience. So the 3 principles, actually mind, thought, and consciousness. Don't get too hung up on the wording. I'm just going to show you something basic. I'm going to share my screen. Let's have a look. So, hang on. Let's have a look, see if I can find it. Right, so this is just a little slide actually from a presentation I did recently. I just want to show you. So what it means to be human. So the 3 principles are mind, thought, and consciousness. But one of the ways I like to just explain them is in more.
Your screen share, your whole screen in terms of me and you sat talking. You get to do a separate application window so you can choose.
Oh, hang on. Is that on now?
Let's have a look, see if it changes. No, I'll take it out and you pop it back in. See if you can choose a window.
All right, okay, share screen. Oh, what would we do without you, Emma?
It should say application or full screen.
Oh, your entire screen. I'm with you.
So you can choose the one thing.
Got it. Is that it?
That is it. I will bring that in.
Don't go anywhere, Emma. So these 3 principles, mind, thought, and consciousness. The way I want you to think about it is this circle on the outside is mind. So we're not talking about the brain in the 3 principles when we're talking about mind. We're talking about universal intelligence. We're talking about the fact that when you wake up in the morning, you don't have to tell your heart to beat. You don't have to tell your lungs to fill with air. You don't have to tell yourself how to breathe, in the same way that the flowers will turn towards the sun when they need the sunlight. It's phenomenal. It's the kind of stuff that if you try and think too hard about, or if I try and think too hard about, it hurts my brain because I can't fathom it. And it's not to be fathomed, it's to know that it's there, and it's you know, it's what the same universal energy of life that we've all got access to. You know, one of the ways as a female who's had a baby that I always remember is being pregnant and thinking sometimes to myself, how on earth am I growing a human being in my stomach? Like, how? And again, it can be quite a scary thought if you try and think about it too hard. But it's just knowing that it's taken care of. We are resilient by nature. We are survivors. We are human beings that are extremely resilient and capable. And we need to trust in that and know that that's there, because actually, if you're looking, it's all around you. Even when I was in hospital, I can remember there were times in that hospital where in the evening we would sit, all residents together, and we would be in hysterical laughter and joking and sharing joy. And that was my innate well-being. That was universal intelligence right there in that room. And yet I didn't see it, because as soon as the nurse would come back in and say, right, it's medication time now, you know, come and have your medicine and go back to bed, the thoughts would kick back in. Oh shit, I'm in hospital. Oh, I'm depressed. Oh God, yeah, I'm anxious, aren't I? And then that would then start again. And I'd go from hysterically laughing and enjoying myself to being in bed crying myself to sleep. So even in the hardest of times in life, we can see this mind, wisdom, gut instinct, whatever you want to call it, is always there. So that's all encompassing everything. It's just there. We don't have to build it, develop it. It is there from the second we are born. It is there, and probably beyond, but I don't know. Then in and amongst that, we've got these other 2 parts, which are also a part of our experience of life. Thought is huge. We experience every second, millisecond, minute, hour of every day through our thinking. Our experience is unique to us because our thinking is unique to us. And so, for example, with anxiety, for me, I was experiencing all of that through thought. So when I felt anxious, even though I felt like it was something that just came and hit me around the face out of nowhere, it wasn't coming from nowhere. I only felt anxious because I had anxious thinking. Then also all encompassed with that is your state of mind, awareness, and mood. And I'm going to show you a little visual to talk about that in a minute as well, because I think that is also really, really important. Is as human beings, our moods will fluctuate. That's just how it works. And I think what we do is we try and interfere with it. I know Emma's talked quite a bit at the moment about motivation. I've been talking with my members group about motivation because, again, for me, motivation is bullshit. Again, it's made up. It's just a state of mind. And we believe we need motivation in order to do this or to do that. We don't need motivation at all, actually. Motivation as a state of mind will come as we just take steps in that direction. So we don't, the way I see it is like, you know, you stand at the bottom of a mountain looking at the top going, I've got to get up there. You're probably going to feel a little bit exhausted and drained even looking at it. And actually, what a waste, because the whole journey up that mountain, there's so much to see on the way up. There's so much to experience on the way up. So we don't want to just be focused on, I need to find the motivation to get to the top of the mountain where the view's wonderful. Actually, the view is equally as wonderful, just different from right at the bottom. And so what I'm going to do now, actually, is whilst I'm in share screen, instead of messing about, I'm going to share this other one. Now, this is me going a bit crazy with the old Canva. So I want you to think about your life, your experience as a human being, your mood fluctuations, as though you're in a lift, a glass lift. And the glass lift is kind of like our level of consciousness, awareness, whatever you want to call it. And it goes from the bottom floor up to the top floor and back down again. hundreds of times. Now, this is what our moods do, and nobody is immune. We can't, again, I think quite often we want to get to the top floor of the lift and stay there because it's the best. It's like, well, it isn't possible. We're not robots. We are having a human experience, and we are experienced with, we're constantly in the feeling of our thoughts, and therefore, as our thoughts change and shift, our levels of consciousness are also equally shifting. We're going to have a very different experience of life. So we will often relate to being at the bottom floor as like, we're fed up, we're sad, low mood. And then at the top, we're ecstatic. But again, as I was just saying about that mountain, sometimes it's about accepting when you're in a lower state of mind, your world maybe has shrunk a bit. Your thoughts are likely to be a bit more contaminated. For example, lockdown is a perfect example of that. People are struggling. The reason they're struggling is because their world has shrunk. And therefore, when our world shrinks, our thinking becomes more contaminated. And we then see that as a problem that needs to be fixed. So we get out of the lift and we start trying to solve the problem. Why am I like this? What's wrong with me? I need to do this. I need to do that. I need to fix it. Meanwhile, if we're outside of the lift exploring, trying to fix ourselves, then the lift is going to go up without us, or it's just going to stay at the bottom. We're not going to experience that mood shifting up. And the bit that people struggle with a lot is, what do I do? And there isn't really anything we do. It's about understanding all of this stuff so that when we are at the bottom, we can appreciate the view for as it is, rather than wishing we were somewhere else, because wishing it and trying to force ourselves to be at the top just isn't going to work. In actual fact, it's likely to create more anxious overthinking and keep your mood lower for longer. But you will notice that your view on life will shift as your levels of consciousness and awareness shift in that. So, for example, an example I always use is of my husband, because he's an accountant, comes to month end, and he gets really busy and he'll work late at night. And sometimes my thoughts are very much around appreciating him, how loving he is, how hard he works for us as a family, what would we do without him? And I feel lots of warmth and compassion towards him. Then it might be the following month and my thinking is contaminated. Maybe I've been, not been out as much or not seen my friends as much. I might be a bit hormonal, whatever it is, doesn't really matter. We don't need to know. But what I do realize is my level of consciousness is lower and my thinking's different. And therefore I might look at him and go, it's so annoying. So I'll go to bed on my own again tonight. And then he'll wake us all up when he goes to bed at 2 a.m. because he's making a noise and it's so irritating. And why does he put work first before us? All the stuff I don't believe to be true. But yet in that moment, when I'm in a lower state of mind, I am more likely to believe those thoughts to be true. So we can have a very different experience of life depending on where our levels of consciousness and our moods shifts are. So if you think about, I'll just stop sharing this now. If you think about translating that into your work life, for example, we're not going to ever be able to work consistently at a level. Oh, I don't know if I'm doing that right now, am I? I don't know. I think you can see me. Oh, there we go.
You're fine.
Come on. She's like a little magical witch that just appears in the window. So if you think about work life, especially if you work for yourself, there's this pressure to be all things all of the time. And I think the more you expect that, the harder you're going to find it. And I think, again, for me, I work less hours than ever before now. But what's even more important than that is that the hours where I'm not sat at my desk and working, that I am not in a whole thought storm around what I've got to do. I commit to either I'm doing it or I'm not. I don't look for the, in between, because you can then be like going on a walk or doing something, but at the same time you're thinking, well, I must do this and I must do that. And I know that we're all guilty of that at times, even as a parent, it's like, I should be doing this with my child, and yet really I have a very no guilt perspective on this, that if I decide I'm taking time to go and sit in the bath for 2 hours in the middle of the day, or go and watch something on Netflix to switch off, or go on an extra long dog walk, then I'm going to do it, and I'm going to commit to it wholeheartedly with full permission to do so. Because then what happens is I come back and sit at my desk and I am way more effective. So the time I'm sat at my desk working, I'm like, my husband laughs. He's like, how do you get so much done in that one space, that hour? And I'm like, because I'm like a machine, because my time away is my time away, and then my motivation and you know, my focus is on point when I'm back at my desk, and that is only because I give myself permission to have that time fully and freely for myself. And yeah, we'll use things like, yes, but I've got this to do, or, well, I can relax. I can't relax until I've done this. I should be doing this. All of this words and dialogue that we make up to beat ourselves with are just really unhelpful. Just one last thing I'll mention, actually, just whilst I'm on the topic of is guilt, because guilt comes up a lot, whether it be a business owner, whether you work for someone else, whether it's in the parenting arena, whatever it is. People talk a lot about guilt, and because our thoughts create our feelings are only really ever an indication of where our thinking's going. So yet when someone feels guilt, they believe that that is a feeling that is telling them something really valuable. So if they feel guilty about not being with their children, it's like, that's telling me that I'm doing a really shit job, and that I really should listen and I should do that. And it's not telling you that at all. What it's actually telling you is that your thinking's off trail, gone off in a direction that's really unhelpful for you. And the way I reframe guilt now, and I love it, is, and I tell everyone to do this, is for me, if I get a feeling of guilt, that is not an indication that I'm not doing enough or a good enough job. It is an indication that I need to let myself off the hook, slow down, and be much more compassionate with myself. It's only ever about us. Our feelings are not a reflection of anyone else outside of us. So if we feel mum guilt, it's not a reflection that our children are finding their mum inadequate. It's a reflection that we have a whole load of thinking about our ability or capability as a mum that we don't need to have and isn't true. So yeah, and that kind of applies across everything. You know, if you're having your feelings are, it's important to listen to your feelings, but your feelings are an indication of where your thinking is at, nothing more, nothing less. It is not an indication of you as a person. You know, there's a lovely quote of Dr. Bill Pettit, who is an amazing mentor of mine. I've done some work with him. He's a wonderful man. He's a psychiatrist in America. He's in his 80s now, and he actually came across the 3 principles in his 40s, and he'd suffered on and off all his life with depression. And then he came across 3 principles, which completely transformed his own experience of life. And he went on to use these principles, or not use them, they're not there to be used, but to explore these principles with people in his own work as a psychiatrist. And one of the things that he says, which I really like, is that a label or a definition. So if you're telling you know, so for me, when I was told I had generalized anxiety disorder, we create stories about ourselves, and these labels just sort of solidify that, and then we believe that that's who we are and that that's how we have to live and all of that, when actually he says that that diagnosis is only ever an indication of where you are at in that moment, not who you are. And again, I think that's really important, because imagine if I'd have completely bought into that label, I would probably still be suffering with anxiety now, because I would have had no hope or no desire to experience myself without it, because I would have just, if I really believed it, I would have just kind of thought, well, that's me and I have to live with it. And whatever it is that people suffer with or struggle with, you know, look at, again, Emma, look at you with your weight loss. You could have gone, well, this is just me, I'm not, but, you know, I don't know whether it was diet or exercise or whatever, you know, this is just how I am. And yet actually it's utter bollocks. You know, that is not who you are. It might have been where you were, but it certainly isn't who you are.
I tell you what's really interesting. I've got this little book out today. Now, this is my intensive care journey book. This is a book that my dad filled out while I was really poorly. And it's 16 years ago today that I went into hospital. And I tend to bring it out at this time of year. And when you talk about that, you know, one of the questions I always come to is, what do you make it mean? Now, I was told continuously by doctors, you don't know how poorly you've been. You need to slow down. You know, it's going to take you this long to get better. And I could have bought into very easily, with the consent and accommodation of everyone around me, being that person that was looked after, that mum brought my food, I had to be looked after because I couldn't get up on the stairs myself. I really easily bought into that as an identity and a tab, which would have been really difficult to then get back out of.
Yeah. And it's interesting that you say that there are people telling you to slow down, when in actual fact, what you've probably done, if we're talking physically, is you've sped up and you've never felt as good. And it's that, but we create these stories and we really buy into them. You know, all thoughts that we have are neutral until we give life to them. And I can always, someone's asking there, who was the inspiring mentor? He's called Dr. Bill Pettit, Pettit. Look him up on YouTube. There's one of his videos that I love. If you type in only one mental illness, because that is just a wonderful, it's about an hour long, but he's well worth the listen. He's also done a podcast about parenting with me on my podcast, which is also wonderful. You can tell I've got like a crush with this 80-odd-year-old man who is just such a wonderful, calming man to be around, and so wise as well. But all thoughts are neutral until we decide otherwise. And I remember being in a law firm, actually, Emma, in Manchester. They invited me in to talk about stress, which is really interesting in an environment where culturally they're encouraged to overanalyze, pick out every minute detail. And so part of mine was like, I get that makes you good at your job. However, it really is unhelpful in your personal life. And I remember talking about thoughts being neutral, and I was saying, you know, whether I decide to have a cup of tea or a cup of coffee is just as neutral as, shall I kill my husband today? And they were all like, clearly it's not. And I'm like, well, it is. It's just a thought. I haven't done either yet. And so they don't mean anything until I bring them to life. And it really is that simple. But yet we, particularly when we're in a lower state of mind, we literally, get to this point where we start to believe everything we think, and it's just not true. It's all made up. It's all made up.
I think that the interesting thing, though, is, Sarie, and this is what really pisses me off, is that the personal development space actively encourages people to continue to pick at the scab, and you're going to find a whole load of shit if you continue to pick at the scab, and it's going to bleed.
Yeah. And to be fair, Emma, when I was trained as a psychotherapist, you're trained to do that. You're trained to, you know, as soon as you meet someone in a first session as a psychotherapy session, you meet someone, you're trained to start thinking, what is their treatment plan? You know, it's what do we need to do? Where do we need to get? And it's, you know, to be fair, it is what people are trained. And yet, and again, it sounds daft. I mean, I know that there'll be people out there, psychotherapists who've trained in the same area of me, thinking, I've lost my marbles because I'm going down like this whole route now of simplify. We don't need to worry about your past. We don't need to know all of that. But I can only go with my own experience of what I now see to be true and have experienced fully in my own life. What I would say, though, is I'm not going to completely poo-poo my past life of a psychotherapist in the sense that, you know, I had 10 years of therapy, and it massively built my awareness and all sorts of stuff. But there is a line where I spent probably far too long talking about my anxiety and seeing it as something that I could never change and never fix. And so that was the sticking point for me. And I've also worked with, there'll be clients that, you know, I've worked with who have come back to me and said, Sarie, you know, you've changed my life and I'm so much better and enjoying my life. And the thing is, what I now see is that's not because they've sat and overanalyzed. They've had insights into their life in that session, probably just through our relationship. And again, I found people, you know, people will say to me when I work with young people, how do you get them to see things different? And it's like, really, all I'm doing is being alongside them in my own well-being. And there's so much to be said because I see resilience in myself and I see how it works. I wouldn't then see a child and go, oh my God, they've just said that they hate themselves and they want to kill themselves. I don't go into a complete panic because I know that is a thought and that we all have those thoughts. And obviously there's situations where children will take that further, but that's because they don't understand their own thinking and therefore it scares the life out of them. And it's not rocket science. And what's been interesting actually is a lot of men have been in touch with these principles because they don't want to go over the past necessarily. They just want to move forward. And that is, for me now, is all it's about is, you know, you can tell me your past if you want, and I'll listen with an open heart and an open mind, and you can talk to me till the cows come home. But also, like, sometimes I even do half an hour coaching sessions, which are very directive, because we want to move forward. And
it's not being pragmatic, isn't it? And right, I've had this conversation numerous times. It's, you know, we're here, and we could sit and analyze and beat ourselves up about why we got here and what's going on and earning it. Like, I could have sat here and sat forever going, I can't believe that you've got yourself into this state, that you're this, that you're that. Was that going to help me move from that state?
No, exactly. But sometimes people will find themselves doing it because they've created a habit of doing it. Because we do. I was thinking the other day, it was a little, really little example of, I was walking my nephew to nursery, and it was cold outside. He had his coat, a big thick coat on, and as we walked outside, he's trying to zip it. He said, I'm going to zip my coat up, Auntie Sarie, and he's really struggling, and his little face is like, but I could see he had it in an angle where it was never going to go on. So I said, here, let me help. He's like, no, I can do it. I can do it. And it just came to me in that moment. I thought, God, we don't half condition our children to not. We want to instill independence in them. Of course we do. But also, so all I said to him was, do you know, sometimes when we're in a rush and we're getting frustrated, it's really okay to ask to have help off Auntie Sarie, you know. And then he just let me do it. And I think it just came, I don't know why. I'm always having these little insights on my dog walks or my little walks where I just thought, yeah, there's not always that balance that it's all right to ask for help. It's okay to feel like we're overwhelmed. All of this stuff is okay. And the less we resist it.
Yeah.
So ironically, the more okay I became with the fact that if I get anxious again, I get anxious, nothing I can do about that, the less it's shown up. But when I was really looking, I was at one point looking for someone to say to me, do X, Y, and Z, Sarie, and you'll never end up in hospital again. Nobody could give me that guarantee.
And you were also anxious about getting anxious.
Always. That's all it was. My life was great. You look at my life is actually no different. I've got the same husband. I've got the same, you know, I live in the same area, same fact. Nothing outside of me has changed other than the way I experience my day-to-day life. And I have the most cheesiest of moments now where if I'd have said this, if I'd have met myself 15 years ago, I'd have thought, she's off a rocket. She's not my cup of tea, because I'd have thought it was too wet behind the ears. Whereas now I'll sometimes just literally be sat there doing nothing and go, oh, I feel so good. And it's just like that feeling of warmth and contentment that I never had before. Very rarely.
Yeah.
We're always waiting for it.
Or looking for it.
Yeah. Thinking, it'll come when I've got more money in the bank. It'll come when my business is successful. It'll come when I'm a stone lighter. It'll come no, it can come right now.
Today.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it. And when I was off the screen, I'm going, yeah, what she said. And I thought, don't interrupt. I get too excited. It's good to get myself off the screen, because I was like, I agree. I totally agree. Has anybody got any questions that they'd like us to chat through, that you want me to put to Sarie? Pop them into the comments, let me know. And would you like to tell us where everybody can hang out with you and find you?
You can find me on Facebook, Sarie Taylor Coaching. You can find me on Instagram at the same. My website's justmyname.com. I just keep it nice and simple. I'm
there. You can find. That you've also got a podcast. Tell us about your book as well.
My book?
Yeah.
My book is Anxiety is a Fucker, or Is It? Because this is me writing from, I used to think anxiety was a fucker. I used to think it took over my life. It ruined everything. And now I realize it didn't. So that's the or is it part. And this is really just me talking about my experience and then the insights that I had along the way. So there's bits about relationship, about being pregnant, panic attacks, just everything that I promised myself when I was in the Priory. If I ever get through this, I'm writing a book, because I would have killed for this book when I was in that hospital. So yeah, so that's it. It's very easy read. It's is
it on the website? Can we get it on the website?
On my website, yeah. Most of my stuff, because I do a challenge, a 5-day overwhelm challenge that's getting really good feedback. If you do my website /welcome, on there's my challenge, my book. There's a free course for young people on there. Oh, Gerarda, that's one of my members saying Sarie's book is brilliant. It's my Bible. She's so lovely. She's awaiting COVID results today. So yeah. And even if you've got it, you'll be all right.
Absolutely. Right. I'm popping all of the links in. So if anybody has got any questions, do let us know and we will endeavour to answer them. If you're watching on the replay, also ask your questions because we will we'll pop back and answer them. I'll tag Sarie in and I'm sure she won't mind shimmying in answering any of your questions that you have. So what would be the one takeaway piece of advice that you are going to leave these gorgeous rock stars with today?
There's nothing for you to do to fix yourself because you're not broken. And even when you feel at your worst, that is just an experience you're having through your thinking in that moment. That's it. Never broken. Never broken.
Bloody love it. Bloody love it. So Joe says, I've had panic attacks for 30 years and my health anxiety is out of control at the moment. I'm really struggling. Any words of wisdom or help, please?
So you have got into a little cycle then of probably, like I was, anxious about being anxious. And then with that comes a whole load of awful physical symptoms that you then worry what they mean and all of that. I'm doing a podcast today on health anxiety because I am inundated at the moment with questions about health anxiety. So I'll so have a look for that. It'll probably go on in the next couple of days. But what I would say is, you know, again, it's about understanding. The best thing for you to do, again, if you go on my Instagram, I shared recently, if in the publications bit, there's some pages of my book that I photocopied for people that were actually about panic, because I think it's really important that you understand what happens when you're panicking, so that the messages you send into your brain and the adrenaline, because it feels really scary, but it isn't. And so the more you realize it's not actually scary, you're not coming to any harm, you will just find yourself automatically settling. You know, that you're just worrying about the physical symptoms. Health anxiety is an interesting one because people think it's different to normal anxiety. Well, it's not. It still comes from your thinking. And actually, I think we've all got some level of health anxiety, because if we're not healthy, then we're at risk that we might die. And therefore, we want to survive. So, but we make it, again, this big thing. I've got health anxiety. No, you're anxious. You're overthinking at the moment whether you're okay or not. It's much simpler than health anxiety. It's, you know, you've lost, like in that circle I showed before, you've lost trust in that you're still breathing, your heart's still beating, all of this stuff. Your body is phenomenal, which is, and again, the fact that you're feeling physical symptoms, maybe like tight chest or palpitations or sweaty palms, all of that is your body doing exactly what it's supposed to do based on what you're telling it. And in a way, it's a good thing, because not everybody gets that warning, you know. So go and explore. Feel free to send me a message and I'll just send you the link. Go and explore what happens when you're having a panic. You need to just build your awareness so that it's not as frightening for you, and it will start to just bugger off.
And I think a lot of, you know, and my view would be that a lot of the times we can get the label and we can stick the label on of what this thing is, and then we live to the label.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, and like you said earlier, Emma, it's everyone around you. You know, my family are so supportive and loving, and my poor mum, it must have been horrendous for her when I was like that. You know, your daughter's off living her best life at uni and traveling, and then suddenly she's in your house crying when you attempt to go out the front door. But yet for a long time after I saw my resilience, people would still say to me things like, should you really book a flight, because you know what you like on flights and you might not go? Because I used to cancel all the time. One of my really good friends, we had a holiday booked a girls' holiday. The two of us were going out to meet my mum and sister, and I woke up at 3 o'clock in the morning, my heart beating out my chest, the worst panic attack. And I rang her and said at 3 in the morning, I can't go. And I let her down. And I've done that many times in the past. And I think even when I realized my resilience, everyone around you is still fearful for you. And so it takes a while But you don't need to force them to see. They will eventually just see.
Yeah. And because obviously mine was more in terms of I'd been laid in intensive care for 10 days of sleep.
Yeah.
And then had to learn to walk and do it. And they were looking at my health needs in terms of physically my capability.
Mm-hmm.
I had more belief in my capacity and capability than they probably did at that time, because they'd observed something very different to what I'd seen.
Mm-hmm.
But I had to kind of go, no, I will do this next thing. And as I walked to the front gate, to the first lamppost in the street, to the second, they then accepted that I was getting stronger.
Yeah.
I didn't need to bring me my tea every night at that point, and I could manage to start to.
And it's just small steps, and they'll start to see, because often people say, how do I explain to my partner about my anxiety? How do I explain this? It's like, you know what? You don't have to. Just keep exploring you. And over time, what will happen is they will see the resilience once you see it in yourself. Yeah. You know, again, when people used to say things to me about my anxiety, I'd get angry, but that was because there was a little part of me that was scared of it still. Whereas now I just smile sweetly and go, oh, if only you knew. Someone I panic when I have to express my needs. Would that be the same process? Yeah. So if you're panicking when you express your needs, you have a whole story in your head around that you shouldn't be expressing your needs, and it's dangerous and it's scary. And that is just a story, a conditioned belief over time that is equally bullshit to all the other. And you can let that go. You can let that go now if you want.
You've made it mean that. So if you've said I'm expressing my needs is really scary and I panic, you've made it mean that there's a weakness, or you've made it mean that people will judge you, or you've made it mean that it's unnecessary and you shouldn't be doing that, or you've made it mean that and it's what made it mean that you're frightened rather than the thing.
Yeah, and it's also about us trying to be in control. Like, you know, another thing I get asked about all the time is people judging us. And it's because we want everyone to like us, and we want to be in control of ourselves by knowing what everyone's thinking about us. And sometimes my answer surprises people in that I'm not like, oh, no, you know, it's like, yeah, they might judge you. Yeah. So what? Yeah. So what? Yeah. You know, let them. It's their prerogative to judge you. It's none of your business if they leave them to it. Like, it's not about us creating this perfection of how we experience life and how others experience us. It's about being honest and real with the ups and downs. So when I was saying earlier about mood fluctuating, somebody, even your closest of friends, when they're in a lower state of mind, will have more judgy thoughts about you because their thoughts are more contaminated for the most part.
Well, look at what you said about your husband. You go from him being the most wonderful man in the world to him being the biggest knobber that you've ever met.
Yeah, and he's not done anything different. It's me.
Yeah.
You know, and so it's good now when I recognize that, I just take myself off to bed, have a little word with myself and go to sleep. And then I wake up the next day and my level of consciousness has shifted again. And, you know, that's it.
Yeah, so good. So good. And I think that this has been so valuable. Come and listen again if you need to. Come and ask questions. Yeah. Go to Sarie, buy a book, because I think that everybody needs to hear this conversation.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, I think it's just about being aware of the fact that we do make things too fucking complicated.
Massively. So much so. And, you know, again, we mirror that then in every aspect of our life. You know, the amount of times I've stopped myself doing a project or doing something because I'm like, oh, I don't understand how this bit works. So it's just too much to think about. It might make me stressed. People talk about stress like a virus that we catch. It's like, oh, if I put myself in a stressful environment, I will get stressed. It's like, no, you can put yourself in any environment. And if your thought process is that you're okay and you're just going to do your best, you'll be fine. If your thought process is, I've got to do this, I've got to understand this, then it's likely you'll feel stressed because of your thinking. And that is it.
It's always, always, always a choice.
Oh.
So, says, thank you so much. I'm still terrified of every panic attack that I have and think that I'm dying. I also can't be left alone. I'm going to purchase your book today. It's so positive seeing how strong you are now after what you've been through. It's given me faith that I can get better. Thank you.
Great. And do you know what? You can totally get through this. If I was in hospital for a month on every single flipping sedative you can imagine, then I hope you see that it is absolutely possible. You're just overcomplicating it right now and you're scared. And when you start to understand, that will settle. I promise you. go and do my 5-day challenge. There's 5 videos, and that explains all of the 3 principles in more detail. And then message me if you've got any questions.
Brilliant. Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for having me. You got me up early and put a bit of face on, so I'm now ready to start the day.
You can absolutely roll into the day and get another brew and knock it out the park, girl. Thank you very much for spending time with us. If you want anything, then get in touch with me or Sarie. Pop your questions into the comments if you're on the replay. Have a gorgeous Tuesday.
Bye. Thanks, everyone.